Will democracy survive in the next couple of years?
And essentially, we are the same.
And there are so many needs that Minnesota has.
What people are saying they need right now.
Access to democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, the Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center in Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Firefly Credit Union, with locations throughout the Twin Cities, has proudly served Minnesotans since 1925. Firefly guides its members forward by delivering customized financial solutions to improve their lives in all aspects of banking. Firefly Credit Union, they light the way with life illuminated. Edina Eye, Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years. Now in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services for dedicated specialists committed to excellence with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
And welcome. We're back with Access to Democracy, the new Access to Democracy on Zoom. Again, we're just getting used to this new world that we're living in. And we have a return guest, a very special guest. I guess now he's a household word because certainly during the impeachment trial, he appeared frequently on CNN and on MSNBC in particular. Richard Painter, welcome back.
Well, thank you very much, Alan. Thank you.
Richard is a professor at the University of Minnesota. He was formerly the chief ethics lawyer for President Bush, and he is, I think, at home at the present time. His wife is also a professor at the University of Minnesota, and they have 3 children. So is everybody under the roof?
We're all here in the house in Mendota Heights, and the kids are online doing their online learning. At least I hope that's what they're doing online. And my wife and I are both teaching classes online here. So it's pretty busy right now.
It's the new world.
Absolutely.
It's a sad world that we live in terms of this coronavirus, where we just hit 50,000 Americans dead today, which is just hard to believe. I mean, it's more than the entire Vietnam War. And to be struck down by a virus like this, certainly where somebody was negligent on the switch, and whether it was China or whether it was in our own State Department and administration, which is how it looks, that's really tragic.
Well, it is. And of course, China mismanaged this, and we're going to learn more about that as it's investigated. And there may have been an effort to cover some things up in China. But the fact of the matter is, we knew about it in late December, that this virus was likely to come to the United States. The State Department knew it, the Defense Department knew it, the Center for Disease Control knew it, the president ignored it. And Donald Trump, all through February, kept talking about how it was no big deal. And he'd even boast. And he'd say, well, people stay home in the United States instead of going to China. People will buy America. He kept saying that over and over again. Donald Trump ignored the disaster that was just around the corner.
Well, he said it was going to disappear like magic in April. Here we are at the end of April, and if anything, the statistics keep going up tragically.
Absolutely. And he keeps denying the truth. Just yesterday, he had a news conference, and he talks about, well, maybe using heat or sunlight would cure the virus, or putting disinfectant into the lungs, implying that you just spray a can of Lysol into your lungs. Well, the manufacturers of Lysol quickly went up on the internet and told everybody, don't even try that. You'd end up in the ER.
Don't do that. Well, it's interesting because I think was the Centers for Disease Control or somebody just came out today to shoot down his previous remedy of whatever that was, polychlorine or something like that.
Yes, and we have had people have to resign from this administration who are working on vaccines and related issues because the president is politicizing it. He's not listening to the experts. He is just wanting to ramble on and have everyone look at him.
Well, he has his internal voice, and that apparently is the only thing that he listens to.
Well, exactly right. And he focuses on himself. It's all about himself and his ego and defending what he did. And if he gets any criticism, he's going to want someone to get fired. And he almost fired Dr. Fauci, who's in charge of this whole thing, from the Center for Disease Control. And I mean, he goes on and on. He has fired top generals in the Defense Department. He has fired FBI directors. We know all about that. Now he's going to start trying to fire the doctors and intimidate the doctors if they don't let him be the head doctor. This is a very dangerous situation.
Not only that, we have so many jobs that are unfilled, and those that are filled by totally unqualified people. I mean, we have a dog breeder who's the head of Homeland Security now, as I understand it.
Well, yes, and that's not the worst of it. We have people like Caputo, this fellow Caputo, who's gone on over to HHS to be the spokesperson. And all he is a TV commentator who's been making racist comments saying the Chinese eat bats or something. And all sorts of comments about Jews and others. So we have a very, very dicey group of people who are in charge at the moment of a great crisis. And then Jared Cook, of course, right there in the middle, completely incompetent, coordinating a lot having to do with the response to the coronavirus. And he has no idea what he's doing. This is a disaster in the making. So what's happened is the governors have had to take over. Governor Walz here in Minnesota has had to ramp up a lot of efforts on testing. We now are going to be able to test maybe 20,000 Minnesotans a day. But we have to do all the work here. The federal government is doing very little, to help.
And interestingly enough, the governors have really stepped into the fray and have taken over in an area that should be the federal government, notwithstanding the fact that Trump denies it. But Trump has so little understanding of what the federal government is and does and should be doing. He has no understanding of the Constitution. He parrots certain things. And he really, the thing that bothers me as much as anything is that he doesn't want to learn. He has no desire to expand his horizon in terms of intellect.
Absolutely not. And when it comes to the power of the federal government, he has the federal government not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and then trying to do that which they should not be doing. For example, he says that he's the one who gets to decide when the states reopen. And he can tell the governors that they cannot continue the stay-at-home orders. He wants to force states such as Minnesota to open up too soon so that we would have a recurrence of the pandemic. And that's exactly what happened in 1918 with the flu, is they reopened a whole bunch of cities and states too soon, and it came back in the fall, and that's when it killed the vast majority of Americans back in 1918, is when it came back. And here in Minnesota, Governor Walz is very carefully trying to figure out when we can have businesses open and when not. He put in a stay-at-home order. And then President Trump, just about a week ago, tweets out this two-word tweet, "Liberate Minnesota." And a bunch of these Trumpers show up at the governor's mansion. Of course, none of them were masked. acting close together, waving their American flags and their Trump posters, and trying to start a riot over the governor's stay-at-home order. So
What
here's the
bothered me,
president saying
what
he can
bothered me
override
as
the
much
governor.
as what bothered me as much as anything in that regard is that it wasn't a spontaneous thing. It was a well orchestrated, uh, rally, which of course we were used to rallies from Trump, but what it came down to was a couple of hundred people in a state of 5 million people now. So, we have to put it in perspective.
Yes, they just showed up at the governor's mansion. The Trump campaign people organized a lot of that. And they're hooting and hollering at Governor Walz, who's just doing his job and trying to keep us safe here in Minnesota. And we have had a better experience with this than a lot of other states. We already have over 200 Minnesotans dead, but it's been better here than a lot of states. And that's due in part to the stay-at-home orders put in place by Governor Walz. And we have the president of the United States directly attacking Governor Walz and other governors for their stay-at-home orders, saying that he has the power, the president has the power to force the governors to reopen, is absolutely false. That's not the Constitution. The Constitution of the United States in the 10th Amendment says that powers that are not given to the Congress and to the president in the Constitution, expressly given to the president and Congress in the Constitution, are to be reserved for the states and for the people. And that means that if there's no act of Congress saying when Minnesota has to be open for business, if there's a pandemic, Governor Walz can put that stay-at-home order in place under Minnesota state law, and Donald Trump needs to back off. And that's the Constitution of the United States.
And that really scares Donald because he likes to be in charge of everything.
Well, absolutely he does. And I pointed out in some interviews that there is a constitutional provision that allows the president to do that. It's Article 48 of the Constitution of the Weimar Republic. It's established in 1919 after the First World War. Allows the right president to force the states to comply with obligations to the right. That provision, Article 48, was used in 1933 by President von Hindenburg at the urging of his Chancellor Adolf Hitler to establish a dictatorship. We knew what happened after that. Well, Donald Trump may wish that Article 48, the Weimar Constitution, was in the United States Constitution. It's not there. The 10th Amendment says precisely the opposite, that if the federal government does not have power under the Constitution, the states have it. And so when he tweets out liberate Minnesota and as a mob show up at the governor's mansion, hooting and hollering and threatening the governor, that's a fundamental threat to democracy. It's one thing, a protest of the citizens of Minnesota, but a protest organized by the president of the United States, that is beyond the power.
It's beyond belief, actually. Now, you mentioned something about stay at home. How are the painters doing under the stay at home? Because we're now in the 6th, 7th week of this.
We are. We're long here. We have two of our kids are in high school and one in middle school, and they're doing it all on the computers. And I believe getting the homework done. And then Karen is a professor in the music department at the University of Minnesota in music history, and she's teaching online, and I'm teaching a course with law students online. So that's working out quite well.
Are you eating well?
Thus far, we're eating well. It's we're going to see what's in supply for the summer. I'll tell you one thing, fruits and vegetables. We do like fruits and vegetables, but they're not going to be available if we don't have the immigrant farm workers in this country. And Donald Trump wants to shut out. So we may have a lot of fruits and vegetables rotting. Our food supply could be in trouble if our government doesn't get its act together. So we're going to see how things work out this summer.
Well, he just said today, by the way, that if the post office wants to get this $10 billion loan, he will only sign the bill if they will quadruple the price of everything that they charge, which would mean we would be paying over $2 to mail a letter, and packages would be going out of sight. That's the latest of the crazies that he's come up with.
Well, you know why he doesn't want the post office in business. He wants to shut them down before November. This his idea to vote by mail. Oh, he doesn't want that going on. He wants to make sure that people actually have to go to the polls, can't vote by mail, and then they can spread scares about coronavirus around the minority neighborhoods in the urban areas, densely packed areas, and trying to keep voters at home. So there's a whole voter suppression agenda going on here, and trying to bankrupt the post office and intimidate the postal workers and so forth. That's part of the game.
Between that and gerrymandering, another way of Republicans have worked very hard to keep people away from the polls.
Yeah, the gerrymander has been going on, and of course the ID laws and the rest of it. But there are going to be a lot of new tricks coming up this year between now and November. They want to win this election. We've already got the United States Senate ramping up an investigation of Hunter Biden. You know, that was stuff that was going on in the Obama administration, you know, quite a while back. But they want to investigate that rather than the Trump administration so they can humiliate Joe Biden, even though there's nothing he did wrong. We've already got people coming up with accusations against Joe Biden. Seriously, some of those people have expressed great admiration for Vladimir Putin. It looks like a replay of 2016.
Well, I hope it doesn't work this time. Now, with it all, you have had time, and you have just written and published a new book,
Yes.
American Nero, the history of the destruction of the rule of law and why Trump is the worst offender.
And that's the book, American Nero, and with Peter Gollenbach, who is a New York Times bestselling author. He's my author here, Peter Gollenbach, and American Nero. Well, you can see right there on the cover is a bust of that Roman Emperor Nero, but we changed the face and put some hair on there. We didn't color the hair orange, but I think you can figure out the American Nero. Yes.
Yeah.
There he is. So, why Nero?
You just spoiled my whole day with that close-up.
Oh, yes.
Now,
Well,
what do we talk about in the book? And obviously, you can get it online. You can't get it at the bookstores at the moment because they're all closed.
absolutely. Just go to Amazon. And I go to Amazon and order it. American Nero by Richard Painter and Peter Gollenbach. I don't know if any of you remember, if you do, but Donald Trump put out a tweet. He retweeted a tweet on March 8th that had been tweeted by one of his people, where there's a picture of Trump playing the violin. And Trump said, I don't know what this stands for, but it sounds like something's good.
And Nero fiddles while Rome burns.
Yep. And there he is, Donald Trump playing the role of Nero. And Trump himself is retweeting it on March 8th. Now, I don't know if he just looked at the cover of our book and he liked the cover. And he might like this cover. I don't think he's going to like what's inside the book. But then again, Donald Trump doesn't necessarily read inside of books. But the cover probably looked quite nice to him. There he is, looking like a great emperor. Well, of course, that was March 8th. He put out that tweet. And he's been fiddling while America burns with the coronavirus. We don't discuss the coronavirus in this book because it went to press in January. But we do talk about narcissism, some of which was definitely characteristic of the Roman Emperor Nero, and indeed King George, the third, who we had a revolution against.
He was also mad.
Oh, yes. We point out in this book, what would it be like if George III had been on Twitter? That would have been a piece of work. The founders understood this problem. The last thing they wanted was a president who would be an American Nero or another King George III. And that's why we have checks and balances in our Constitution. Why we have an impeachment, which we ignore, an impeachment provision, which the United States Senate failed to hold a trial. But the founders wanted to hold a man like Donald Trump accountable. And so in this book, in the first part of this book, we don't even talk about Trump. We talk about the various challenges the United States has had to the rule of law throughout our history, everything, the legacy of slavery, to the oppression of other minorities, and the attempts to suppress political freedom after the Red Scare in 1920, in the McCarthy era, and of course the Watergate experience. We've had many, many very challenging situations in the United States where the rule of law has been put under a lot of stress. And
Probably never like this, however.
And that's the thing, is it all comes together. With Donald Trump, we've had more challenges to the rule of law within a shorter period of time than ever before in our history from one man.
It occurred to me earlier today, and I haven't had a chance yet to check out how many lawsuits that the Trump organization administration has started and lost in the federal courts, because I think that there are probably dozens. And another one just came down today, I believe, or yesterday, where they get wrapped on the knuckles. That one was about the EPA and pollution running into the ocean from, I guess, from fracking and from oil operations.
This administration has a terrible record in the courts, and that's with very conservative Republican-leaning judges. So this is a situation where Donald Trump can whine all he wants about liberal judges, but the majority of federal court judges are conservative and Republican. And yet Donald Trump and his administration run into trouble in the federal courts because they simply don't understand the rule of law. And with the Justice Department run by Bill Barr, who is the most political attorney general in history, and I think the worst attorney general in history, and we've had some pretty bad ones. We have a Justice Department that does not understand that the administration needs to at least make credible arguments when they go into the federal courts. And so they've lost quite a few cases, and I expect them to lose quite a few more.
Now, you were part, an integral part, of the Bush administration. How can you, or is there any way of comparison between what you saw as part of that functioning administration and the chaos of this one?
Well, we discussed in the book American Hero prior administrations, and there are certainly things that went wrong in the Bush administration. I was the chief ethics lawyer in charge of financial conflicts of interest, but there are a number of other areas where things went off the rails, including the torture memos of the Department of Justice, the firings of United States attorneys for political reasons, and a bunch of scandals. We had some scandals, quite a few in the Clinton administration, and of course Nixon, and even the Obama administration, an excellent record, but they had one or two scandals. You're going to always have some scandals. I have to say this administration, the Trump administration, has more breaches of the rule of law across the board in more different areas than any administration in history. The previous administrations, you'd find specific areas where they're exceeding the rule of law. Maybe President Obama's executive orders may have been too broad. The Bush administration, a lot of it had to do with the response to 9/11 and the war in Iraq. The Johnson administration in Vietnam, and so we've had breaches of the rule of law in the past. But this administration, across the board, whether it's the president's emoluments at the Trump Hotel, Jared and Ivanka in the White House, their approach to commandeering parts of the federal budget to build a wall on the southern border. The list just goes on and on in area after area. It's a widespread attack on the rule of law.
I was looking back at some of my blogs, and back as far as 2016, after we were the election was over, I talked about the fact that this president is unbalanced. And I think everything that's happened since then indicates that I was perhaps even understated in terms of whether he's got all his marbles, because I don't think he is evil the way Machiavelli was evil, but he certainly is not a sane person.
Well, that's another serious concern, is the psychological stability of the President of the United States. And in a crisis, that is a particularly dangerous situation. Just look at his Twitter feed, and you can see that he's absolutely obsessed with himself. I mean, why would the President of the United States tweet out, retweet, and make a comment on a tweet, a picture of himself playing a fiddle like the Emperor Nero, if he just weren't completely obsessed with his own ego? And he puts out sympathy ploys all the time, trying to get people to think that he's somehow a victim. And he put out a tweet recently where he said, well, we should, in the coronavirus, we all respect our elders. And then he puts the parentheses, except me. In other words, nobody's respecting him. And poor Donald Trump. It goes on and on and on. There's something wrong with this man. And he is in control of this crisis, and it's turning out to be an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah, and I think it is an unmitigated disaster. And I don't know if you heard this, because some of his followers are just as crazy, but Dan Patrick, the lieutenant governor of Texas, day before yesterday, talking about opening up society, said we have to open it up because there are, and I'm quoting now, there are more important things than living. And that one just blew me out of the water.
More important things than living. Well, we're going to have a lot of dead people, the attitude. And once again, we have opened it up now. We're going to have an absolute disaster in the fall. And that's happened in 1918 with the flu epidemic. I mean, they had some deaths in the spring. But then they thought it went away. And, oh, we'll open up again and have parades and everything. And then by the fall of 1918, you had enormous devastation and death because they opened it up again. Well, this is something we need to be careful of. And it is very, very dangerous to have governors and mayors making these decisions for political reasons, and Donald Trump getting in the act. We need the experts. We need real doctors who are advising the governors as to when it's safe to reopen and how to reopen and which businesses to reopen. And that's where I think Governor Walz is doing a careful job trying to figure that out here in Minnesota. But we just don't need Donald Trump involved. He ought to just go off to his golf course and do whatever he does and stay out of our business.
Even if it's closed, and perhaps that would be a good thing if he was just left on a closed golf course. And all his sycophants and really acolytes are just as bad. Why haven't they instituted the 25th Amendment? Why haven't they stepped forward and removed him from office? You know, even Pence at least has a brain. He might be philosophically attuned to Trump.
They're afraid of Trump. They're afraid of him. They're afraid of his power to mobilize a rabid base. They're afraid that he's going to take away their jobs, that he's going to cause damage to the Republican Party in the fall if they anger him.
Have they looked at the unemployment in the last few weeks, taking away jobs? What is it, 26 million now?
26 million, but it's not their jobs. They don't care. And that's what's going on here. Mitch McConnell only cares about himself. And he's going to focus on that election in Kentucky, hoping he can win another term. If not, he wants to make a lot of his rich friends happy and give them plenty of money out of that CARES Act handout, $2 trillion or whatever, make sure it goes to the corporations. So someone will put the butter on his bread when he leaves the Senate. So they're focusing on themselves. That's what they're doing.
We've got much more to talk about, but I actually see that we have used up our time. So I want to thank you, Professor Richard Painter, and we're going to have to continue this as we get closer to the election. The name of the book is American Nero, and if you want to hold it up again.
American Nero. There's American Nero. Yes, and by Richard Painter and Peter Gollenbach. It's available, of course, on Amazon. And if the bookstores ever open up again, it's there too. But you can order it on Amazon. And read it while you're watching the political conventions this summer, which I believe will be online if they're smart.
Richard, thank you very much. And that's it for Access Democracy on this Zoom interview. Thanks again.